Jake had always dreamed of being part of a space exploration team, but nothing had prepared him for the reality of meeting an alien face to face. The human team landed on the strange, beautiful planet, with its skies painted in hues of purple and orange. Towering trees stretched toward the sky, and the air was thick with the scent of alien flowers. But there was little time to enjoy the view. The mission was simple: establish contact with the planet's inhabitants and learn about their technology. If things went well, humans could learn much about this advanced alien species. The locals, called the Zera, had lived in isolation for centuries, their civilization advanced but secretive. Jake was nervous but excited as he followed his team leader, Captain Harris, to the entrance of a large city-like structure. The Zera had invited them here, but the invitation felt cold and distant, more like an obligation than a welcome. As they entered the city, Jake couldn't help but notice how quiet it was. No children ran through the streets, no sounds of laughter or shouting. The people of Zera moved in an almost eerie silence, their footsteps soft on the ground. Their skin shimmered in shades of blue and green, and their eyes, bright and intense, seemed to scan the humans carefully. Jake's heart raced as they approached the main building, where they would meet their first official representative of the Zera people. Standing in front of them was an alien woman, tall and graceful, her features sharp and defined. She wore a cloak that seemed to blend into the shadows, making her appear even more mysterious. "This is Zera," Captain Harris introduced her. "She is one of the leaders of the Zera people." Zera's eyes studied each of them with a calm, almost cold expression. Jake felt the weight of her gaze. But it wasn't just that there was something about her that made him feel small. Her presence was commanding, and it made him want to prove himself worthy of her attention. Zera spoke, her voice deep yet soft, with a clear accent that was hard for Jake to understand at first. "Welcome, humans. We have been expecting you," she said. But there was no warmth in her words, only the echo of formality. Jake tried to gather his thoughts. But when Zera turned her attention toward him, he found himself fumbling for words. "It's an honor to meet you, Zera," Jake said, offering a polite smile. "We're excited to learn about your culture." Zera didn't smile back. She simply nodded, her eyes narrowing slightly as if she had already made up her mind about the humans. She turned to Captain Harris and spoke to him in her language, which made Jake feel even more out of place. After what felt like an eternity, Zera turned back to Jake. "You seem eager to learn," she said, her voice dripping with a touch of mockery. "But I'm not your pet. Do not expect me to perform tricks or entertain you." Jake froze, stunned by her bluntness. He quickly realized that the Zera were not interested in forming a friendship with humans. This wasn't a diplomatic mission. In the way he had hoped, it was more about gaining something from the humans and nothing more. He opened his mouth to apologize, but Zera didn't wait for him. She turned her back on the group and began walking toward the next part of the city. Without another word, the humans followed her, unsure of how to handle the situation. As they walked through the city, Jake couldn't shake the feeling of being dismissed. Zera didn't even look back to check if they were following. She moved with purpose, her steps graceful and swift, and the humans did their best to keep up. Jake noticed that the others seemed uncomfortable too, but no one spoke up. They were all focused on the mission, and they couldn't afford to upset the Zera. But Jake couldn't help himself. He felt like there was more to Zera than just her cold exterior. There was something about the way she carried herself, like she had a story to tell that no one knew. Maybe it was her beauty, or maybe it was the mystery surrounding her. Whatever it was, Jake couldn't stop thinking about it. As they neared the center of the city, Zera stopped in front of a large building that looked like a palace. She turned to face the humans, her gaze softer than before. "We will continue the discussion here," she said, and for the first time, Jake saw a hint of something other than coldness in her eyes. Perhaps it was curiosity, or maybe something else, but it was there. The humans followed her inside, and Jake couldn't shake the feeling that his encounter with Zera wasn't over yet. As much as she had tried to push them away, he couldn't stop wondering about the alien woman who had so bluntly declared, "I'm not your pet." There was something about her that made him want to understand her more, to learn the truth. Behind the wall she had built around herself, and as the team entered the grand hall, Jake couldn't help but feel that this was just the beginning of an unexpected journey. As the humans followed Zara into the grand hall, Jake couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The building around him was unlike anything he had ever seen. The walls were made of some kind of shimmering material, reflecting the light in strange patterns. The air smelled fresh, like clean rain after a long drought, and the atmosphere was peaceful, almost too peaceful. The quiet hum of the city outside seemed to disappear the moment they stepped inside. Zara led them to a large circular table at the center of the room. It was made of smooth, dark stone, and strange symbols were carved into its surface. Zara sat down first, her movements graceful, like she was used to commanding attention without even trying. The humans followed suit, taking their seats around the table, feeling more out of place with every passing moment. Jake tried to focus on the task at hand. This was supposed to be a mission of peace, to build a bridge between the humans and the Zara people. But every time he looked at Zara, he felt the weight of her words from earlier. "I'm not your pet." Those words kept echoing in his mind, and he found himself wondering why they had stung so much. It wasn't just the way she said it, but the way she carried herself, so proud, so powerful, yet so distant. Zara didn't waste time with pleasantries. She immediately began speaking about the Zara's plans to maintain their isolation. She explained that their people had always kept to themselves, focusing on advancing their own technologies and not getting involved in the affairs of the wider galaxy. Her tone was firm, but there was an underlying layer of caution, as if she was carefully measuring every word she spoke. "Your people are different," Zara said, looking directly at Captain Harris. "You come to us expecting cooperation, but we do not need your help. The Zara are strong. We have no desire to be part of your galactic politics." Captain Harris nodded, keeping his expression neutral. "We understand that, Zara, but our mission isn't to force ourselves into your culture. We only want to learn from you. We believe there is much we could share with each other." Zara didn't reply immediately. She stared at the humans with an unreadable expression. Then, she turned her gaze to Jake, who had been quiet until now. He felt his heart race under her intense gaze, but he wasn't sure why. There was something about the way she looked at him that felt different from the others. "Jake, was it?" Zara asked, her voice as calm as ever. "You are the one who spoke to me earlier. Tell me, what is it you truly want from us?" Jake felt a sudden rush of nervousness. This wasn't part of the plan. He was supposed to stay quiet and let Captain Harris do the talking. But there was something about Zara that made him want to speak up, something about her that made him feel the need to explain himself. I don't want anything from you," Jake said, his voice more uncertain than he intended. "I just want to understand. You're different, and I've never met anyone like you before. I just want to know you better." Zara raised an eyebrow, a faint smile tugging at the corner of her lips. "Understand," she repeated. "And what would you do with that understanding? Is it to help your people control ours, or do you simply want to know how we live?" Jake felt the weight of her question settle in the room. He opened his mouth to respond, but found that no words came out. What could he say? Zara wasn't wrong. Humans often entered other species' worlds with the intention of learning and growing. But was it truly ever just about understanding? Wasn't there always an underlying goal? He didn't want to lie to her, but the truth felt harder to explain. Before he could answer, Zara stood up, her expression shifting. "You are curious, Jake, but curiosity often leads to things that should be left unknown." With that, she turned and walked toward one of the walls, her back to the humans as she gazed out of a large window. The view outside was breathtaking, showing a vast landscape of distant mountains, lush forests, and rivers that sparkled in the alien light. Jake couldn't help but watch her. There was something about the way she held herself, the way her posture seemed to express a quiet strength that made him want to know more. It was as if she was a puzzle, one that was difficult to solve, but one he couldn't stop trying to piece together. He noticed how she seemed lost in thought, her fingers lightly tracing the edge of the window frame. There was no denying it, Zara had a power about her, an energy that was both captivating and intimidating. But Jake didn't fear her. In fact, the more he saw, the more intrigued he became. "Zara?" Jake called out cautiously. She didn't respond right away. For a moment, he thought she hadn't heard him. But then she turned around slowly, her eyes meeting his. "I'm sorry if I've said something wrong," Jake continued, "but I'm not trying to control anything. I just want to learn, if you'll let me." Zara's gaze softened for a fraction of a second before her mask of indifference returned. She turned away from the window and walked back to the table, resuming her seat. "Your words are curious, Jake," she said, "but actions speak louder than words." The silence that followed was thick, heavy with unspoken tension. The humans exchanged nervous glances, unsure of what to say next. Zara's eyes flicked between them, but there was a softness now, a crack in her armor. Jake wasn't sure if she would ever let her guard down completely, but there was something between them now, something that hadn't been there before. And for the first time since meeting Zara, Jake allowed himself to believe that maybe, just maybe, there was a chance for a real connection between them. But only time would tell if that would happen. The days that followed were filled with silence and small moments of understanding. Jake couldn't shake the memory of Zara's eyes, her words, and the way she seemed to carry herself with such quiet strength. There was something about her that made him want to know more. But every time he tried to bridge the gap between them, she pushed him away, retreating into her shell. Jake, however, wasn't one to give up easily. As the mission continued, he found himself constantly thinking about Zara every time their paths crossed. He felt an unspoken tension in the air. He wasn't sure if it was his curiosity or something deeper that was drawing him to her. But he knew one thing for sure: there was a connection, even if she wasn't ready to admit it yet. One morning, after a particularly difficult meeting with the Zara Council, Zara and Jake found themselves alone in a quiet courtyard of the Zara Palace. The air was cooler here, and the sounds of the city seemed distant, replaced by the soft rustling of alien trees in the wind. Zara sat on a stone bench, her posture as straight as ever, her expression unreadable. Jake hesitated for a moment before walking over to her, his heart pounding in his chest. He had grown accustomed to the awkward silence between them, but today felt different. He wasn't sure if it was the weight of the mission or the way Zara had looked at him earlier, but something in the air felt charged. "I've been thinking," Jake said carefully, his voice a little quieter than usual, "about what you said, about learning. I know you don't want to be treated like a subject of study, but that's not what I'm after. I want to understand you. I want to understand your people." Zara turned her head slightly, her sharp eyes meeting his. She said nothing at first, just watching him with a calm expression, as if she was measuring his sincerity. "I didn't mean to offend you," Jake continued, his words coming out faster now, as if he was afraid she might shut him out again. "But you're different. You're not like anyone I've ever met, and I respect that. I respect you." Zara didn't speak for a long time, and Jake began to feel the familiar weight of uncertainty in the air. He was about to apologize again when she finally spoke, her voice soft, yet firm. "You think you respect me?" she asked, her words almost a challenge. Jake nodded. "I do." Zara's gaze softened, but only for a brief moment. Then, her lips curled into a faint smile, though it didn't reach her eyes. "Respect is earned, Jake. It's not something you give away lightly." Jake thought about her words for a moment. There was truth in what she said. Respect wasn't something he could simply hand over. It had to be earned. He understood that now, more than ever. "I understand," he said quietly, "and I'm willing to earn it." Zara didn't respond to that immediately. Instead, she stood up and walked a few steps away, her movements fluid and graceful. Jake watched her as she paced, feeling the tension in the air grow thicker. He wasn't sure where this conversation was going, but he felt it was important to push forward, to show Zara that he wasn't just another human trying to control or dominate her people. "I didn't mean to hurt you," he said, his voice low but sincere. "I didn't mean to make you feel like you were something to be studied. I don't know how to explain it." But there's something about you. You're strong, Zara. You don't need anyone to protect you. But I want to be someone who stands beside you, if you'll let me. Zara stopped pacing and turned to face him. She didn't say anything for a moment, but the silence between them wasn't uncomfortable anymore. It was calm, thoughtful, as if she was processing everything he had just said. "You're persistent, Jake," she said at last, her voice softer now, less guarded. "But persistence doesn't always lead to understanding." Jake took a step forward, careful not to crowd her, but wanting to show her that he was serious. "I know," he said, "but I'm willing to try. I'll keep trying, Zara, until I understand you, until I earn your respect." Zara's eyes narrowed slightly, and for a moment, Jake thought she might shut him down again. But then, to his surprise, she walked back toward the stone bench and sat down. Her posture less rigid now. She looked up at him, her gaze less sharp than before. "You are unlike most humans I've met," she said slowly. "Most would have given up by now, but you're still here. Why?" Jake hesitated for a moment, then sat beside her on the bench, though he kept a respectful distance. "Because I think you're worth it, and I don't want to give up on understanding you." Zara looked at him for a long time, her eyes searching his face. She said nothing, but her expression softened in a way that Jake hadn't seen before. For the first time, he saw something beyond the cold, detached leader. He saw a woman who had been hardened by her responsibilities, who had learned to protect herself, but who wasn't as unapproachable as she seemed. Zara leaned back slightly, her gaze returning to the distant city beyond the courtyard. "You're still young, Jake. You don't understand the weight of the things I carry." Jake glanced at her, his heart beating faster. "Maybe not, but I want to." For a moment, there was no reply. Then, surprisingly, Zara leaned slightly against him, as if the small gesture had been nothing at all. She didn't curl up in his lap, but it was enough. Jake sat very still, unsure of what to do, but not wanting to disturb the fragile moment between them. It wasn't much, but it was a start. The days had passed slowly since Jake's conversation with Zara, but something had changed. Their interactions were no longer filled with coldness or distance. There was a strange kind of understanding between them now. Though neither of them spoke about it directly, they continued their work, collaborating on the mission and learning from each other. Zara was still reserved, but there were moments when she seemed to soften, just a little. When she looked at Jake one evening, after a long day of talks with the Zara Council, Jake found himself standing in the courtyard again. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of purple and gold. It was quiet, peaceful, and Jake liked it here. The sound of the wind rustling through the trees and the distant hum of the city was calming. He had always felt comfortable in places like this, where everything seemed still and untouched. Zara appeared, as if she had been waiting for him. Her silhouette stood against the fading light. Tall and graceful, she didn't speak at first, just watched him for a moment, her eyes searching the horizon. Jake was surprised to see her here. He had been expecting to spend the evening alone, lost in his thoughts, but now, with Zara standing before him, he felt like there was something he was supposed to understand. "Jake," Zara's voice broke the silence, soft and steady, as usual. "There's something you should know." Jake turned to face her, his curiosity piqued. "What is it?" he asked, stepping toward her. She hesitated before speaking again, her gaze drifting downward for a moment. "I've seen humans come and go. Many of you seek something, but few of you stay long enough to understand. You're different, Jake. You stayed. You've tried to understand, even when I made it hard for you." Jake wasn't sure what to say. Her words felt like a compliment, but there was also something else behind them, something deeper. He took a small step forward, not wanting to push her, but wanting to show her that he was here for more than just the mission. "I'm not going anywhere, Zara," he said quietly. "I'm not like the others. I'm not going to give up on trying to understand you or your people." Zara's eyes met his, and for a moment, Jake saw something different in her gaze. It wasn't the cold, distant look she had worn when they first met. There was a flicker of something else. Maybe it was trust, or maybe it was curiosity. Either way, It made Jake feel like he was getting closer, even if only by a small amount. She took a deep breath, as though weighing her next words carefully. I didn't want to like you. Jake, she said, her voice softer than he expected. I didn't want to trust you? I thought humans would just try to take advantage of us, like so many others have before. But you're different. Jake felt his heart race a little. He couldn't help the small smile that tugged at the corner of his lips. I'm glad. You think so? For the first time, Zara smiled too, though it was a faint smile. Barely a curve of her lips. It was enough for Jake, though. It felt like progress. The evening grew colder, and Zara walked over to a stone bench near the edge of the courtyard. She sat down. Her posture still perfect, but this time, there was something more relaxed about her. Jake followed her and sat down beside her, though he kept a respectful distance. I don't understand why you want to stay here with me, Jake, she said, her voice quieter now, almost to herself. I don't make it easy for you. I don't let people in, yet here you are. Jake looked at her, his expression sincere. Because I think there's more to you than what you show. I think you're strong, but I also think you're lonely. You don't have to be alone, Zara. Zara didn't look at him right away, but she didn't move away either. The air between them was thick with unspoken words. Jake wasn't sure what more to say. All he knew was that there was something about Zara that made him want to keep trying, to keep being there for her, no matter how distant she seemed as the minutes passed. Zara finally turned to look at him, her expression softening. I am not like you, Jake, she said, her tone barely above a whisper. I carry the weight of my people, my responsibilities. I cannot afford to show weakness. Jake didn't respond immediately. He didn't need to. He understood what she meant. Zara had to be strong, not just for herself, but for her entire people. She had to protect them, lead them, and in doing so, she had built walls around herself, walls that no one could easily break through. But Jake wasn't trying to break her. He just wanted to be there, to offer support if she ever needed it. I don't think showing kindness is weakness, Jake said after a long pause. I think it's strength. It takes courage to trust someone, to let someone in. Zara studied him for a long time, as if trying to decide whether she could believe his words. Finally, she let out a soft sigh and leaned back against the stone bench. Maybe you're right, she admitted, her voice quiet. But I don't know how to let someone in. Jake smiled gently, his heart warming. Maybe I can teach you, he said, one step at a time. The night settled around them, peaceful and quiet, as the two of them sat there, side by side, without saying another word. It wasn't much, but it was enough. There was a quiet understanding between them now, something that hadn't been there before. Zara may not have been ready to fully let down her guard, but Jake was patient. He would be there, no matter how long it took. He believed that, with time, she would come to trust him, just as he trusted her, for the first time. Jake felt like they were on the same path, even if they were still walking in silence. The days were becoming easier, and with each passing moment, Jake felt the invisible walls between him and Zara slowly begin to crack. It was a small change, but it felt significant. There was something different about Zara now, something less guarded, something more human. Jake wasn't sure if she was aware of it, but he could sense it. It wasn't as if she had completely opened up, but she had started to let him in, even if only just a little. One evening, after a long day of meetings and talks with the Zara Council, Jake found himself walking through the palace gardens again. The sun had just set, and the sky was a deep shade of indigo. The stars above twinkled like tiny diamonds, and the cool evening breeze made the alien flowers sway gently. The peacefulness of the garden had always been a place where Jake could think clearly, but tonight he wasn't alone. Zara had followed him outside, her footsteps soft on the stone path. She didn't speak at first, just walking beside him as if she was deep in thought. Jake didn't mind the silence. It wasn't uncomfortable anymore. He had grown used to it, and in a way, it felt like a kind of understanding between them. After a few moments, Zara spoke, her voice quieter than usual. Why do you keep trying, Jake? She asked. Why don't you give up like the others? Jake turned to look at her, surprised by the question. "I told you before," he said, his voice gentle. "I'm not like the others. I don't give up on people, especially not when they're worth it." Zara paused, her eyes scanning the horizon as if searching for something. She wasn't looking at him, but Jake could tell that she was listening closely to his words. He could feel the weight of her gaze, even without seeing it. "You're different," she said after a long silence, her voice almost to herself. "You don't treat me like a leader or a powerful being. You don't try to impress me with your knowledge or skills. You treat me like I'm just a person." Jake smiled softly, the warmth in his chest spreading as he heard her words. "I've always thought people should be treated like people, not like titles or expectations." Zara turned to him then, her expression serious but not cold. "But you've never been in my shoes, Jake. You don't understand what it's like to be the one everyone depends on, the one everyone looks to for answers. I don't know how to let go of that." Jake felt his heart ache for her. He had always known that Zara carried a heavy burden, but hearing it from her made it feel more real, more personal. "I can't imagine what it's like," he said softly, his voice full of sincerity. "But I'm here for you. You don't have to carry that weight alone. I want to help, even if it's just by listening." Zara's eyes softened, and for the first time, Jake saw a flicker of something he hadn't seen before, a crack in her strong exterior. She didn't speak for a long time, but she didn't pull away either. Instead, she just stood there, looking up at the stars, her posture less rigid, less tense. After a while, she turned back to face him. Maybe you're right," she said quietly. "Maybe I've been too focused on carrying everything alone." Jake took a small step closer, careful not to crowd her, but wanting to offer his support. "You don't have to do everything alone, Zara. There's strength in letting others help." Zara didn't answer immediately. Instead, she looked at him for a long moment, her eyes studying his face. She was silent, as if she was weighing his words, trying to understand if they were sincere. Finally, she spoke again, her voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know how to trust like that, Jake." Jake nodded, understanding her hesitation. "I know, and I'm not asking you to trust me completely right now. I'm asking you to take small steps. Let me show you that you don't have to carry everything on your own." Zara looked at him, her eyes searching his face for something. Jake didn't know what she was looking for, but he didn't look away. He held her gaze, steady and sure. For a moment, Zara's expression softened, and then, as if making a decision, she sat down on a nearby stone bench, patting the space next to her. It was a small gesture, but it felt significant. Jake hesitated for a moment, then slowly sat beside her, careful not to invade her space. For a few minutes, they sat in silence, the soft rustle of the alien trees around them the only sound. Zara's shoulders were no longer as tense, and Jake noticed that her hands, usually clenched into fists, were resting loosely in her lap. "I didn't think I'd ever be able to do this," Zara said quietly, her voice soft but clear. "I didn't think I'd ever be able to let anyone in." Jake turned to look at her, his heart swelling with warmth. "I'm glad you're letting me in." Zara glanced at him, her eyes soft and thoughtful. "Maybe there's more to you than I first thought, Jake," she said, her voice almost shy. Jake smiled. "Maybe there's more to you too, Zara." The moment hung between them, quiet but filled with understanding. It wasn't the kind of moment where everything changed, but it was a step towards something more, something deeper than either of them had expected. As the stars above them continued to shine, Zara leaned her head back against the bench, her eyes gazing upward. Jake did the same, feeling a sense of peace that he hadn't felt in a long time. For the first time, they were just two people, sitting together, sharing the night in silence, not as strangers, not as leaders, but as equals. And in that moment, Jake knew that they were moving forward, one small step at a time. The days began to feel like a blur. Jake and Zara continued to spend more time together, though their interactions were still measured and cautious. There was no grand shift between them, no dramatic change, but there were moments, small moments, that made Jake believe things were slowly changing. The mission was progressing well, and the Zera had shared some of their technology with the human team. It was clear that Zera's role as a leader was important, and Jake respected her dedication to her people. Yet, despite the barriers, he could see that she was starting to open up, even if only a little. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a warm golden glow across the Zera city, Jake found himself standing on the balcony of his quarters, gazing out at the view. He had come to enjoy these quiet moments, especially since the hustle and bustle of the day was finally over. The stillness of the planet's twilight was a welcome relief. As Jake leaned against the stone railing, he heard footsteps approaching from behind. He turned to see Zera walking toward him, her silhouette framed by the setting sun. She didn't say anything at first, just stopped beside him, her presence quietly filling the space between them. They stood together in silence, the peaceful hum of the city below them making the moment feel surreal. Jake wasn't sure why, but he felt a sense of calm whenever he was around Zera, even when she was quiet. There was a presence about her that made everything feel just a little bit more meaningful. "You've been quiet lately," Jake said, breaking the silence. He turned slightly to face her, his voice gentle. "Is something on your mind?" Zera glanced at him briefly before turning her gaze back to the city below. "I've been thinking," she said, her voice softer than usual. "About what you said before, about trusting people." Jake's heart skipped a beat. He didn't want to push her, but he had always been patient. He gave her space, allowed her to come to him when she was ready. "What did you decide?" he asked carefully. Zera didn't answer immediately. She seemed to be gathering her thoughts, weighing her words. After a long pause, she spoke again. "I've spent so much of my life building walls around myself. I thought it was the only way to keep my people safe. But now, I'm not so sure." Jake felt his chest tighten with a mix of emotions. He didn't know how to respond at first, but he didn't want to say the wrong thing either. "You don't have to carry the weight alone," he said quietly. "It's okay to lean on others, Zera. I'm here for you. You don't have to face everything by yourself." Zera's gaze softened as she turned to look at him. For the first time, her expression wasn't guarded. There was no wall between them, just a quiet understanding. She didn't speak, but the way she looked at him made Jake feel like his words had reached her, even if just for a moment. After a few seconds, Zera stepped closer to him, her presence warm but unhurried. "I know you're here for me," she said. "It's just hard to let go of everything I've known. Hard to trust that someone else will be there when I need them." Jake nodded, understanding her struggle. He knew it wasn't something that could change overnight. Trust, after all, wasn't built in a day. But he also knew that Zera was capable of more than she gave herself credit for. "You don't have to do it all at once," Jake said gently. "Trust is something that builds over time. But you've already taken the first step by letting me in. That's more than most people ever do." Zera looked at him, her eyes searching his face for something. Jake didn't know what she was looking for, but he didn't look away. He let her see him, completely open, without any expectations or judgments, for a long time. Zera didn't speak. She simply stood there, her gaze steady and calm. Jake waited, not wanting to rush her. He was content just to be there, by her side. As she processed everything she had shared with him, finally, Zera spoke again, her voice soft but steady. I think I might be ready to try." She paused, her expression thoughtful. "To trust. I mean, not just you, but others as well." Jake's heart lifted, and a small smile tugged at the corner of his lips. "That's all I ask for, Zera. Just one step at a time." She nodded, her eyes not leaving his. For a brief moment, there was something unspoken between them, something that neither of them could quite explain. It was a quiet connection, a bond that had slowly been built on patience and understanding. As the stars began to appear in the sky, Zera leaned against the railing beside Jake, her posture more relaxed than it had ever been before. They didn't need to say anything else. The quiet moments were just as important as the conversations. And tonight, in the stillness of the evening, both of them felt that they were on the same path. Jake wasn't sure what the future held, but for the first time, he felt hopeful. There was still much to be done, many challenges ahead, but he believed that they would face them together. Zara had started to trust him, and that was all he needed to know that they were moving in the right direction. The night stretched on, and the two of them sat in silence, watching the stars, knowing that this was just the beginning of something bigger, something worth waiting for. The days seemed to pass faster now. Jake noticed the small changes in Zara, how she no longer kept her distance as much, how she would sometimes smile when their eyes met. It was subtle, but to Jake, it felt like a huge shift. She was letting him in, little by little. It wasn't just about the mission anymore. There was something deeper between them now, something that made each moment feel more significant than the last. One evening, after a long day of work, Jake found himself walking the gardens again, as he often did when he needed a break. The quiet of the place helped him think clearly, and the stillness was a welcome contrast to the chaos of the day. It was becoming a ritual for him, these solitary walks through the peaceful alien garden. But tonight, he wasn't alone. As he walked down a winding path, he saw Zara up ahead, sitting on the same stone bench where they had shared a quiet moment. Days before, she was looking at the stars, her posture relaxed, her hands folded gently in her lap. When Jake approached, she didn't turn to look at him, but he could tell she was aware of his presence. He slowed his pace and took a deep breath before joining her. "Mind if I sit?" he asked, his voice gentle but full of curiosity. Zara didn't reply right away. She simply nodded, the faintest of smiles tugging at the corner of her lips. It was a small gesture, but to Jake, it was everything. He sat down beside her, careful not to crowd her, and looked up at the sky. The stars were as beautiful as ever, twinkling in patterns that seemed both familiar and foreign at the same time. Jake found comfort in their quiet presence and the way they stretched across the sky, countless and timeless. For a long time, they both sat in silence, lost in their thoughts. Jake wasn't sure what was on Zara's mind, but he knew she was thinking about something important. He had learned that much in the time they had spent together. When Zara went quiet, it meant she was working through something. Eventually, she spoke, her voice soft but clear. "Jake, I've been thinking about everything you said, about trust and about letting go." Jake turned his head to look at her, his heart racing a little. "What do you mean?" he asked carefully. Zara turned to face him then, her eyes serious but not cold. "I've spent so much time building walls around myself, hiding behind my responsibilities. It's been easier to stay distant, to keep others at arm's length. But you've made me see things differently. You've shown me that I don't have to carry everything on my own." Jake felt a warmth spread through his chest. He had always known that Zara carried a heavy burden, but hearing her say the words out loud made it more real. She wasn't just the leader of her people. She was a person who was capable of vulnerability, just like anyone else. "You don't have to carry it all, Zara," Jake said softly. "I told you, I'm here for you. You don't have to do everything alone." Zara's gaze softened, and, for a moment, she looked away, her eyes scanning the stars above them. "I know," she said quietly, "and I've been thinking, maybe it's time I stopped hiding. Maybe it's time I let someone in, really in." Jake didn't know what to say at first. He had always hoped that Zara would come to this realization on her own. But hearing her admit it felt like a victory, not just for him, but for her. He reached out, placing a hand gently on hers, careful not to make her uncomfortable. To his surprise, Zara didn't pull away. "I'm glad to hear you say that," he said, his voice steady. "It's not easy, but you don't have to do it alone anymore. You've got me, Zara." Zara looked at him then, her eyes searching his face. There was something raw in her expression, something honest. She wasn't just the proud, distant leader anymore. She was a person, someone who had learned to trust, even if just a little. For a moment, the air between them was still, thick with the quiet understanding that had grown between them. It wasn't perfect, but it was enough. It was a bond forged in small moments, in words and actions that had slowly built trust over time. Then, without warning, Zara did something that surprised Jake. She leaned her head against his shoulder, not as an act of weakness, but as a small gesture of comfort. Jake's heart skipped a beat, but he didn't move, didn't pull away. Instead, he let her stay there, just for a moment, the warmth of her presence grounding him. It wasn't the kind of gesture that changed everything, but it was a beginning of something new between them, something that didn't need to be rushed or forced. Jake felt a sense of peace that he hadn't felt before, as if everything they had been working toward had finally fallen into place. Zara pulled back after a few moments, her eyes meeting his with a soft smile. "Thank you, Jake," she said quietly, "for being patient with me, for showing me that trust isn't a weakness." Jake smiled, his heart full. "You don't have to thank me. I'm just glad you're letting me in." Zara looked at him. For a long time, and for the first time, Jake saw something more in her gaze. It wasn't just respect or trust, it was something deeper, something that made his heart race in his chest. Maybe it was the beginning of something more than just a friendship. Maybe it was the beginning of something neither of them had expected. As the night stretched on, they sat together, watching the stars in comfortable silence. There was no pressure, no need for words, just two people finding comfort in each other's presence, knowing that whatever the future held, they would face it together.